The challenge of compiling a list of the 10 greatest U.S. presidents is quite difficult. It's not simple to pick the top 10 presidents out of 45. President Biden does not qualify for a rating because his presidency is still ongoing. Of course, some choices are self-evident. Some presidents, such as George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, stand out so prominently that they must be included in any top 10 list. Policy leadership, crisis management, the quality of their appointments, how foreign leaders view them, their character and integrity, how effective they are at gaining popular support, and the vision they have for the country are all factors to consider to be included in the top 10 list. A president must have demonstrated excellent qualities in all 7 categories. Lyndon B. Johnson. Following JFK's assassination in 1963, Lyndon B. Johnson was elected president. He began by enacting the legislation that JFK had planned to enact before his death, including an updated civil rights bill and tax cuts. But it was his Great Society proposal, which he submitted to Congress in 1965, that made him famous. Educational assistance, medical advancements, environmental protection, the advent of Medicare, crime prevention, and equal voting rights were all part of the program. In 1969, he also oversaw the space program that took astronauts to the moon. His legislative relations and pursuit of equal justice, which were encapsulated in his Great Society program and civil rights laws, earned him the top spot. Ronald Reagan. This actor-turned-politician stimulated the economy, created jobs, cut government spending, and strengthened national defense forces, but the result was increased government debt. Reaganomics was the name given to Ronald Reagan's economic initiatives. Many people believed he implemented big tax cuts that primarily benefited the wealthiest. He was ranked 9th on the list because of his political persuasion, crisis leadership, and more favorable opinions of his economic management. Reagan presided over the United States' longest period of economic success during a tranquil period. John F. Kennedy. During his presidency, JFK launched a failed CIA-led plot to topple the Cuban government. He used military force to avert the Cuban Missile Crisis, which could have resulted in an all-out nuclear war, and he set out to implement his New Frontier Plan, which included tax reform, positive labor and education improvements, and major civil rights push, but it never materialized entirely. He excelled in political persuasion, fighting tirelessly for labor, education, and civil rights. It's also worth noting his efforts as a crisis leader, as he was instrumental in slowing down the nuclear weapons race. Thomas Jefferson. A political dispute erupted between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton before Jefferson's presidency, resulting in the foundation of 2 parties, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, which Jefferson finally led. He was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence and had an international reputation for his works. As president, Jefferson reduced the national debt, dispatched naval forces to confront Barbary pirates interfering with American commerce in the Mediterranean, and wrested the Louisiana region from Napoleon in 1803, which included 15 of today's states. Jefferson was praised for his handling of legislative relations and agenda setting. He was, after all, the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, and for having to work closely with Congress to get the Louisiana Purchase Treaty approved. Harry S. Truman. At the close of World War II, he decided to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and launch the Equitable Deal, which included measures to enlarge social security, promote fair employment, and clean up slums. When the Soviet Union threatened to seize Turkey and Greece, he requested legislative assistance, which became known as the Truman Doctrine. When North Korea attacked South Korea in 1950, he tried to limit the violence to a minimum. With the Truman Doctrine, which extended military aid to countries resisting communist upheavals, and the Marshall Plan, which helped reconstruct post-war Europe's economies, Truman single-handedly spared Western and Southern Europe from communism. He was the first president to recognize the threat posed by the Soviet Union. He took steps to halt communism spread, forming groups like NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, to restrain Soviet expansionism. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower used his experience as a commanding general in the United States Army during World War II to help him win the presidency. He took steps to mitigate the effects of the Cold War, negotiated with the Soviet Union during the nuclear arms race, and helped to bring peace to the South Korean border after years of conflict. On the domestic front, He maintained New Deal and Fair Deal policies and began desegregation in schools and the military. Eisenhower signed the first civil rights bill since the Civil War ended. Several Southern governors refused to enforce the Supreme Court's order to integrate public schools, and he stood up to them. Finally, Eisenhower established the modern interstate highway system. Theodore Roosevelt. As a result of President McKinley's assassination, Theodore Roosevelt was elected to the presidency. He pushed the United States to become more involved in foreign events while in office, facilitating Panama's secession from Colombia in order to begin construction on the Panama Canal and winning the Nobel Peace Prize for mediating the Russo-Japanese War. He was known as the head of the Progressive Movement, which included his Square Deal proposal, natural resource conservation, corporate control, and consumer protection, as well as his philosophy that the government should do whatever it takes for the sake of the people. The Panama Canal was named after Theodore Roosevelt, and he was the first American to win the Nobel Peace Prize for concluding the conflict between Japan and Russia in 1906. Roosevelt also regulated industries to safeguard ordinary people from business abuses. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt holds the distinction of becoming the only president to be elected to 4 terms. During the Great Depression, he became president and offered actual assistance to those who were impacted. Millions of Americans benefited from his New Deal programs, which laid the groundwork for the contemporary welfare state. Franklin D. Roosevelt saved European democracy by assisting the United Kingdom early in its fight against Nazi Germany, and he transformed the United States economy into a wartime economy capable of winning World War II. During the war, he became one of the United Nations founding fathers, committing the U.S. to an active foreign policy of involvement. During his fireside chats, radio broadcasts to console the people during the Great Depression, he famously said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." He founded the New Deal coalition, which played a key role in reorienting American politics toward democratic principles and establishing American liberalism. Because of his political persuasion, he calmed the country through its worst economic crisis, and for foreign relations, since he led the country through a significant war. George Washington. As the country's first president, Washington performed an outstanding job of laying the groundwork for the country. He not only served as commander-in-chief throughout the Revolutionary War, but he also founded the cabinet system of government and maintained good communication with department heads. But, in the midst of it all, Washington had to deal with certain issues. Some states had yet to join the Union. The French Revolution prompted political turbulence in which Washington became involved, and America's army was in poor condition. Washington was ranked second because of his moral authority, economic management, and performance in the context of the times. He upheld the Constitution's provisions, successfully suppressed the Whiskey Rebellion, and navigated the presidency during the country's infancy. Abraham Lincoln. By signing the Emancipation Proclamation, Abraham Lincoln effectively led the country through the Civil War and paved the stage for the abolition of slavery. He is best famous for delivering the Gettysburg Address, which opens with the famous lines, "Fourscore and 7 years ago," declaring that all men are created equal. In 1865, he was shot and killed by John Wilkes Booth during a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Despite receiving excellent honors in many areas of governance, historians rank Lincoln first because of his crisis leadership. He led America through the bloodiest conflict in its history while maintaining the Union. Not only did Abraham Lincoln save the Union, but he also issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring the Confederacy's slaves free, and advocated for the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery in the United States. He was a founding parent of the Republican Party and strengthened the president's war-making powers. If Lincoln had lived longer, the reunification of the Confederate States would have gone more smoothly and with less controversy. Who do you think is the greatest president of the United States of America? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thanks for watching.